It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. And we're on the line today with Craig Shirley, who is a biographer of Ronald Reagan. Craig, how many books have you done on Ronald Reagan? 2, 3?
I've written 5, and I'm working on a sixth book with Governor Christie, as a matter of fact, about Ronald Reagan. But I've written other books, too. I wrote a book that was a New York Times bestseller, December 1941, and I wrote a biography of Newt Gingrich, and so it keeps me off the streets and all the pool halls.
There you go. I read the December 1941 book. It's wonderful. Absolutely terrific.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
I just finished. In fact, I'm finishing today the companion book to December 1941. This is April 1945, about the end of the war and what was happening in America during the end of the war. So I hope you like this one. It comes out early next year. I hope you like this one as much as you like December 1941.
Oh, if it's anything like December 41, we're good. I mean, that was a fantastic book. Hey, this, of course, we're looking back to the 40th anniversary of the assassination attempt on the life of President Reagan, and why not talk to you about this? You know everything there is to know about the guy.
No, I'm discovering new things all the time.
Well, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because we're discovering new things even about this event, the assassination attempt, even today, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that as public and as friendly as he was, Ronald Reagan was a very, very private man, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. He was, and he treasured his privacy, and that's why he liked the seclusion of his ranch there in California, because it was up in the Santa Ynez Mountains, 600 acres, and there he could be alone and let his hair down and not have to put on airs, or not that he'd put on airs ever. But he could relax. Well, he couldn't relax when he was president because he was on stage all the time. There at the ranch, he could relax and not worry about what people are going to write or say about him. Like
the rest of us, did you sit there wrapped by the event itself?
I did. I did. I was in New York City on business that day with a group of madmen, and somebody burst in the room and told us the president had been shot, and we immediately gathered around a television and watched the disinformation that was on the television by Al Haig and others, and but it did impel me to move to Washington with my wife later that year and join the Reagan Revolution. And we both worked at the Republican National Committee, and then later I worked at the White House Conference of Small Business, and I saw Reagan up close and personal many times, and it really inspired us. For us, it was being young and being in Washington and working for a man we adored, Ronald Reagan. It was really our halcyon days, our halcyon years when we were there.
Craig, did the event change as much as we are perceived that it did? Did it change the way things are covered and the way people manipulate and use media, as it seems that it did?
I'd like to say yes, but I'm not certain of it. I know there's a lot of the reporters, network reporters, were much more responsible than they are today. You got people like Chuck Todd, who just spews disinformation all the time. Whereas back then, Frank Reynolds really strove Tom Brokaw, others really strove to report just the facts without any political bias whatsoever. You don't see that today. And when they were mistaken, they admitted they were mistaken, like Frank Reynolds did that day when he falsely reported that Jim Brady had died. Jim Brady didn't die. He'd been shot, but he didn't die that day. And Reynolds was very emotional because he was also friends with Brady. He was very emotional when he withdrew the Brady announcement. But it was, for him, it was also personal because he was, even though he was a political liberal, he was personal friends with both Reagans, both Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan. And they'd had dinner with him and had spent time covering them in the 76 and 80 campaigns. And a friendship grew between the three of them. And he always respected Reagan's principles, even though he disagreed with them.
It was 40 years ago that the assassination attempt was made on the life of President Reagan, and we look back on that time and what the world was like in that day, and we wonder about if it had happened today, how differently it would be covered. But one of the interesting things to me about it was in the aftermath, as we waited for news of the recovery of President Reagan, how he managed to keep it lighthearted, and we really didn't have a clue as to how serious it really was and how close he came to losing his life that day.
John Kennedy used to use the phrase "grace under pressure," which he'd gotten from the ancient Greeks. Grace under pressure, and Reagan showed it that day that he was shot to the American. And something they took note of and they never forgot. That this was a man who could handle the adversity and come through with flying. And they respected Reagan, and an affection grew up that day between the American people and Reagan that never really went away, that never really failed him. And that was important, that he had not only the support of the American people, but he also had the respect of the American people. And it was also the time when the Democrats started calling him the Teflon president after that, and they took it as a term of derision. But the people around Reagan took it as a compliment, much like the phrase Yankee Doodle Dandy, because Reagan was resolute with Gorbachev or with Yeltsin or with Tip O'Neill or with the air traffic controllers, and they respected him for that, and that's why. When he left office, he had a 73% approval rating, and so unheard of today to have a president who's actually able to talk to the other side and get along and compromise with the other side. I don't think it was much too soon.
We could tell by the number of phone interruptions here how many people are trying to get on with you here today. So just one more question for Craig Shirley, and that is, do we appreciate enough the role that Nancy Reagan played in not only the nation's recovery, but her husband's recovery from this?
No, we don't. Mrs. Reagan has never gotten her due. It's good. That is a good question. Ronald Reagan would not have been Ronald Reagan without Nancy Reagan. If he wanted to be the best shoe salesman in the world, she would have made sure he was the best shoe salesman in the world. It's just that he wanted to be president, so she was going to make sure that she was going to do whatever she could to make sure he was president. And she when he was in office, her personality was often submerged, but she was there when he needed her. Not on policy, but she was a very actor for people who were trying to use him for their own purposes instead of there to actually help the president. So she was very good at the with their antenna, shooting up to oppose those individuals. Nancy Reagan has never gotten the praise or the compliments she deserves, and that's always struck me as a tragedy. That because she was, she put up with a lot. She put up with the tax. She put up with her own children. She put up with a lot of criticism. A lot of it was unfair criticism, and yet she tough. The last time my wife and I saw her was at the 100-year anniversary out at the Reagan Library, 100-year anniversary of Reagan's birth, and she was in a wheelchair by then. But we talked to her, and she still had a twinkle in her eye. She was elderly, very elderly by then, in her late 80s, early 90s. But she was very gracious to us right until the end, as she'd been her whole life, and it was a very bittersweet moment for us because we knew we probably weren't going to see her again, and so and we didn't until we went to her funeral and saw the turnout at her funeral. Went to a funeral at the Reagan Library.
He is Craig Shirley, spending some time with us today. We appreciate it so much. Have a wonderful day today. Thank you so much.